The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Larkspur Creek as Zara Wilson stood on her porch, shotgun in hand, watching the lone rider approach through a cloud of dust. Arizona Territory, 1885, a time when a woman alone invited trouble, and Zara had seen more than her share. "That's far enough, stranger," she called out when the man was within earshot, the barrel of her Winchester steady despite the weight. The rider pulled his horse to a stop, raising both hands to show they were empty. "Madam, I'm just looking for some water for my horse and maybe directions to the nearest town." His voice carried across the distance between them, a low rumble that somehow felt familiar. Zara narrowed her eyes against the dying sunlight. Something about the way he sat on his horse, tall and straight despite obvious exhaustion, reminded her of soldiers she'd known. "Water's at the back. Then you can be on your way." The man dismounted with a wince he tried to hide, leading his chestnut mare around to the water trough. Zara followed at a distance, shotgun still ready. As he came into clearer view, she noticed the tear in his shirt along his left side, the fabric darkened with blood. "You're hurt," she said, not lowering her weapon but feeling her nurse's instincts stirring. "It's nothing," he replied, though his pale face told a different story. "Just a disagreement with some gentlemen who thought my money belonged in their pockets, and they expressed this disagreement with a knife." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Something like that." The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with dust and eyes the color of a summer storm. There was something in those eyes, a depth of pain that went beyond physical, that made Zara hesitate. "I'm Vincent Xavier," he said, "former cavalry, now just passing through." Zara's finger relaxed slightly on the trigger. "The nearest town is Silver Creek, 15 miles east. Doctor there can patch you up." Vincent nodded but made no move to mount his horse. Instead, he swayed slightly, grabbing the water trough for support. "Much obliged, Miss Wilson." "Zara Wilson," she sighed, lowering the shotgun finally. "You won't make 15 miles in your condition, Mr. Xavier. Just Vincent, please, or Vince." Zara studied him for a long moment. It had been 2 years since she'd allowed anyone to stay on her property, 2 years since betrayal had taught her the danger of trust. But leaving an injured man to die on the trail went against everything she believed. "You can stay in the barn tonight," she decided. "I'll look at that wound." "But you'll be gone by morning." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you." As she helped him to the barn, his weight heavy against her shoulder, Zara wondered if she was making another mistake. But something told her Vincent Xavier was different from the other men who had passed through her life, leaving destruction in their wake. She couldn't have known how right she was. Vincent's wound required 12 stitches, which Zara administered with the skill of someone who had sewn up more than her share of injuries. Her homestead had once served as an unofficial field hospital during the border skirmishes with Mexico, and before that, she had learned nursing during the Civil War. "You've done this before," Vincent observed, watching her work by lantern light. "More times than I care to remember." "War." Zara nodded, not looking up from her work. "Antietam, Gettysburg." Vincent's breath caught. "I was at Gettysburg, second day on Cemetery Ridge." Her hands stilled for just a moment. "I was in the field hospital behind the lines." A connection formed between them, unspoken but undeniable. They had walked the same blood-soaked ground, breathed the same gunpowder-filled air, though their paths had never crossed. "What brought you out here?" he asked as she tied off the last stitch. "My brother. He came west after the war, wrote me about the beauty of the territory." Her voice grew tight, said it was a place where the past couldn't follow. Was he right? Zara stood, packing away her medical supplies. "No, the past follows everywhere." Vincent didn't ask more, seeming to understand that some stories weren't meant for sharing with strangers. She left him with a blanket and canteen of water, locking her cabin door behind her despite something in her gut telling her he was no threat. Morning brought surprises. When Zara stepped onto her porch, she found her woodpile stacked nearly twice as high as it had been the day before, and Vincent chopping more despite his injury. "You should be resting," she called, crossing her arms. Vincent set down the axe, wiping sweat from his brow. "Figured I'd repay your kindness before heading out." "I told you to be gone by morning." "Sun's barely up," he replied with a slight smile. "Still technically morning for a few more hours." Zara fought the urge to return his smile. "Your stitches will tear." "I was careful." He gestured to his side. Former cavalry, we learn to work through pain. Something about his earnestness softened her resolve. Have you eaten? When he shook his head, Zara surprised herself by inviting him inside for breakfast. It was the first time in 2 years she'd allowed a man into her home, and every instinct screamed caution. But as they shared a simple meal of cornbread and coffee, Vincent proved himself a respectful guest. This land is beautiful, he commented, gazing out her window at the rolling hills beyond her property. How long have you been here? 5 years. My brother Thomas staked the claim, but Zara's voice caught. He died 3 years ago. Fever took him. Vincent's eyes filled with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, losing family is the hardest thing. You sound like you know, he nodded, his gaze dropping to his coffee cup. Lost my parents young, then my wife and daughter 6 years ago. Comanche raid on our homestead near Fort Stockton while I was away on patrol. The grief in his voice was raw, even after years. Zara recognized it, the same hollow ache that never truly healed. That's why you left the cavalry, couldn't stay. Every patrol, every fort. It all reminded me of what I failed to protect. Zara understood all too well. She'd come west to escape her own ghosts, only to find new ones waiting. After breakfast, Vincent insisted on repairing her leaking roof before departing, another act of gratitude she hadn't requested but couldn't refuse. As the day progressed, Zara found herself watching him work, noting how he favored his injured side but never complained. By sunset, the roof was fixed, the wood was stacked, and there was no more reason for him to stay. Yet Zara found herself reluctant to see him go. It'll be dark soon, she said as he prepared to saddle his horse. Silver Creek isn't safe to approach at night. Vincent paused. Are you offering me another night in your barn? It seems the sensible thing to do, she replied, feigning practicality when something else entirely motivated her offer. That night, she brought dinner to the barn, a luxury she told herself was simply because he'd worked so hard despite his injury. They sat on hay bales, sharing a stew she'd prepared and stories that carefully avoided the deepest wounds. Vincent told her about his travels since leaving Texas, working as a horse trainer, occasional ranch hand, and even a brief stint as a sheriff's deputy in a small Colorado town. Nothing seemed to fit, he admitted, so I kept moving. Running, you mean, Zara said, recognizing the pattern all too well. Vincent's eyes met hers. Maybe, what about you? Are you running or settling? I thought I was settling. Zara stirred her stew. Now I'm not sure what I'm doing. Your land is impressive for someone working it alone. I manage, she said stiffly, though the truth was more complicated. The struggle to maintain the property by herself grew harder each season. Vincent seemed to sense her unspoken challenge. I didn't mean to imply you couldn't handle it. It's just what? Impressive, he repeated. Most men couldn't do what you've done here. Something in his sincerity disarmed her. For the first time in years, Zara felt truly seen, not as a woman attempting a man's job, but as a person accomplishing something remarkable. The next morning, Zara woke to the sound of hammering. From her window, she spotted Vincent repairing her chicken coop, which had been damaged in the last storm. She watched him for several minutes, noting the care with which he worked, stopping occasionally to speak gently to the hens pecking around his feet. When she approached with coffee, he accepted it with a grateful smile. Hope you don't mind, noticed it needed fixing. You don't need to earn your keep, Mr. Xavier. I'm not running a work camp. Vincent, he corrected. And I know, but idle hands make me restless. Over the next 3 days, a pattern emerged. Each morning, Zara would insist he should continue his journey, and each day Vincent would find another repair needed on her property. Each evening, she would tell herself tomorrow she would firmly send him on his way, yet when tomorrow came, she found another reason he should stay. On the 4th day, as they worked together mending fences, Zara finally asked the question that had been bothering her. Where are you actually headed, Vincent? He hammered a nail into place before answering. I was thinking California, heard there's good land in the northern valleys. For settling, maybe, he paused, wiping his brow. Though lately I've been thinking Arizona territory has its merits. Their eyes met briefly before Zara looked away, uncomfortable with the warmth his gaze stirred within her. Not much here but hard work and harder people. I don't mind either if there's purpose to it. That evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Vincent asked about the scar on her left hand, a jagged line that ran from knuckle to wrist. War wound, he guessed. Zara shook her head. More recent. A reminder not to trust too easily. Vincent waited, not pushing but offering space for her to continue if she wished. Something about his patient silence made her want to share the story she'd kept locked away. After my brother died, I was alone out here. Vulnerable, though I didn't realize how much. She flexed her scarred hand. A man named James Blackwell started calling, charming, helpful, said he was a cattle buyer from Denver. Vincent remained silent, though she could feel his attention like a physical presence. We became close. He proposed marriage after 6 months. Zara's voice hardened. Then I discovered he was working for the railway company. They wanted my land for a new route. The proposal, the courting, all a scheme to get me to sign over the property. What happened? I confronted him. He didn't take kindly to being exposed. She held up her scarred hand. Tried to force me to sign the papers. I fought back with a letter opener. He left, but not before promising he'd be back with others. Did he return? No, but his threats were enough. Zara's eyes remained fixed on the darkening horizon. I learned my lesson about men with kind words and hidden motives. Vincent was quiet for so long that Zara wondered if she'd said too much. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and careful. Not every man is James Blackwell. Perhaps not. But it's safer to assume they are until proven otherwise. The following day, a spring storm rolled in, bringing with it sheets of rain that turned the yard into mud and made work impossible. Confined to the house, Vincent and Zara found themselves in closer quarters than before. He helped her cook, his large hands surprisingly deft at kneading bread dough. They played cards, read from her small collection of books, and talked more openly than they had before. Vincent spoke of his daughter, Lily, who had been just 4 when she died, how she had loved to ride on his shoulders and chase fireflies in the Texas twilight. Zara told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her work as a nurse, and her brother's dreams for their Arizona homestead. As thunder crashed outside, Vincent asked about a faded daguerreotype on her mantel, a young man in uniform standing beside a woman in a nurse's apron. My fiancé, Robert, Zara explained. He was a doctor with the Union Army. We met at Antietam. What happened to him? Typhoid 3 months before the war ended. Zara's voice was steady, the grief long ago transmuted into something she could carry. We had plans to start a hospital together in Philadelphia. Is that why you became a nurse, to work with him? Zara shook her head. I was already nursing when we met. It was one of the few ways a woman could contribute directly to the war effort. She smiled faintly. Robert appreciated that I didn't faint at the sight of blood. As the day wore on, and the storm showed no signs of abating, their conversations delved deeper. Vincent revealed how he'd wandered aimlessly after his family's death, taking increasingly dangerous jobs as if testing fate. Zara admitted how lonely the years had been since her brother's passing, with only occasional visits from neighboring ranchers breaking the isolation. By evening, the rain had slowed to a gentle patter on the roof. Vincent stoked the fire while Zara prepared a simple supper. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on either of them, how natural it felt to move around each other in the small cabin. I should check on your stitches, Zara said after they'd eaten. Make sure they're healing properly. Vincent nodded, removing his shirt with careful movements. The wound was healing well, the inflammation greatly reduced. As Zara's fingers gently probed the area around the stitches, she became acutely aware of his warmth, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his muscles tensed slightly under her touch. Does it hurt? She asked, her voice unexpectedly husky. No, he answered, his eyes finding hers. Not anymore. The air between them changed, charged with something Zara had forbidden herself to feel for years. She pulled her hands away abruptly, stepping back. You're healing well. Another week and the stitches can come out. Vincent caught her wrist gently. Zara. The sound of her name on his lips sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to let her guard down, to trust again. Then reality reasserted itself. She pulled away. It's late. You should sleep in the barn tonight. The storm's passing. Hurt flickered across Vincent's face, but he nodded, reaching for his shirt. Of course. Thank you for checking the wound. That night, Zara lay awake, listening to the receding storm and the turmoil in her own heart. Vincent Xavier was everything James Blackwell had pretended to be: kind, hardworking, honest. But how could she be certain? How could she trust her judgment after being so thoroughly deceived? Morning brought clear skies and difficult decisions. Vincent was loading his saddlebags when Zara approached the barn. "You're leaving," she said, stating the obvious because she couldn't find other words. Vincent secured a bag to his saddle. "Seems like it's time. My wound's healing, the repairs are mostly done, and—" He hesitated. "I think my presence is causing you distress." "That's not," Zara began, then stopped herself. It wasn't entirely untrue. "It's complicated. I understand." He turned to face her, his expression open. "For what it's worth, Zara, I've never met anyone like you, strong, capable, determined." His smile was tinged with sadness. "The kind of person who makes a wanderer consider putting down roots." Zara felt something crack inside her, the protective shell she'd built around her heart, developing its first significant fissure. "Vincent, the sound of approaching horses interrupted her. Both turned to see 3 riders coming up the path to her homestead. Zara recognized the lead rider immediately: John Hargrove, owner of the largest ranch in the area, and a man who'd made no secret of his desire to absorb her land into his holdings. "Trouble?" Vincent asked quietly, noting her expression. "Potentially," Zara replied. "Hargrove's been trying to buy me out for years." Vincent casually unbuckled his gun belt, adjusting it to ensure easy access to his revolver. "Want me to disappear?" Zara considered, then shook her head. "No. Let's see what he wants." They walked out to meet the approaching riders, standing shoulder to shoulder on Zara's porch. Hargrove pulled his horse to a stop, his 2 companions, clearly hired hands, flanking him. "Miss Wilson," Hargrove called, his tone falsely jovial. "Fine morning after the storm." "What can I do for you, Mr. Hargrove?" Zara asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Hargrove's eyes flicked to Vincent, assessing. "I see you've got company, unusual for you." "My business, not yours," Zara replied coolly. "Indeed." Hargrove dismounted, approaching the porch. "I've come with news and a renewed offer." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "The territorial legislature just approved a new property tax. Small ranches like yours will be hit hard." He held out the paper, which Zara took and scanned quickly. The tax increase was significant, possibly ruinous for her operation. "My offer still stands," Hargrove continued. $500 for your land, fair price considering the circumstances." Vincent shifted beside her, a subtle movement that nonetheless caught Hargrove's attention. "And who might you be, friend, Vincent Xavier?" His voice was neutral, revealing nothing. Hargrove studied him with narrowed eyes. "Passing through or staying? Haven't decided yet." Something in Vincent's tone made Hargrove reassess the situation. He turned back to Zara. "Think about my offer, Miss Wilson. Times are changing. Women alone out here. It gets harder, not easier." "I'll manage," Zara said firmly, "as I always have. Stubbornness won't feed your stock or pay your taxes." Hargrove's friendly facade slipped slightly. "Be reasonable." "This land is worth more as part of a larger operation." "Worth more to you, perhaps," Vincent interjected, "but this is Miss Wilson's home." Hargrove's expression hardened. "This isn't your concern, stranger. I'm making it my concern." The tension between the men was palpable. One of Hargrove's hands moved his horse slightly forward, his hand resting near his holstered gun. "Gentlemen," Zara said sharply, "Mr. Hargrove, I appreciate your offer, but my answer remains the same. This land is not for sale." Hargrove studied her for a moment, then nodded curtly. "As you wish, but when the tax collector comes calling, remember I made a fair offer." He mounted his horse. "Good day, Miss Wilson, Mr. Xavier." They watched in silence as the 3 riders departed. Once they were out of earshot, Vincent turned to Zara. "Will that tax bankrupt you?" Zara folded the paper, her expression troubled. "It won't be easy. I'll need to sell more of my stock than planned, maybe take on extra work in town." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "I could stay, help you prepare for the next tax season." "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," he countered. "It's an arrangement, room and board in exchange for labor. Plenty of ranches operate that way." Zara studied him, trying to discern his motives. "Why would you do that? You were headed to California. California will still be there next year." Vincent's gaze was steady. "And maybe I'm tired of wandering." The prospect was tempting, having help with the endless work, not facing another winter alone. But beneath those practical considerations lay something deeper, something that frightened her more than Hargrove's threats. "I can't pay you much beyond room and board," she said, testing his resolve. "I don't need much, and it would be temporary, just until I get things in order." Vincent nodded. "Understood. You'd stay in the barn," a slight smile. "Of course." Zara took a deep breath, making her decision. "All right, until winter, then we'll reassess." Vincent's smile broadened. "Yes, madam." The following weeks established a new rhythm on Zara's homestead. Vincent proved himself an invaluable worker skilled with the livestock, knowledgeable about crops, and seemingly tireless when it came to repairs and improvements. Under his care, the chickens increased their egg production, the milk cow gave more consistently, and the vegetable garden expanded. Zara found herself adapting to his presence, at first maintaining a careful distance, but gradually allowing herself to enjoy his company during meals and evenings on the porch. They developed an easy partnership, each recognizing the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. When Vincent discovered Zara's old piano in a storage room brought west at great expense by her brother, he encouraged her to play again. Her fingers, stiff at first from years of neglect, gradually remembered the melodies of her youth. Vincent would sit quietly by the fire, listening as she played Chopin and Beethoven, pieces that seemed wildly out of place in the Arizona wilderness yet somehow perfect in their cabin sanctuary. As spring turned to summer, Zara noticed subtle changes in herself. She laughed more easily. She took time to watch sunsets instead of immediately moving to the next task. She found herself looking forward to their conversations over dinner, to Vincent's observations and quiet humor. But with this gradual thawing came fear. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness, Vincent reached for her hand. Zara allowed the contact for a moment, savoring the warmth of his calloused palm against hers before pulling away. "This isn't wise," she said softly. Vincent didn't immediately respond, his profile illuminated by the last glow of sunset. "Because of your past, or mine?" "Both, neither." Zara searched for words. "You're still grieving your family, and I don't know if I can trust what I feel anymore." "I've had 6 years to grieve," Vincent said. "I'll always miss them, but I've made my peace with their loss." He turned to face her. "It's different for you. Your trust was betrayed." Zara nodded, unable to deny it. "I understand if you can't trust me," Vincent continued. "But I'm not going anywhere, Zara, not unless you ask me to leave." The summer brought both bounty and challenges. Their vegetable garden thrived, providing more than enough for their needs and surplus to trade in town. The cattle fattened on rich grass, promising good prices come fall. But the tax collector came calling, as Hargrove had predicted, and the payment strained their resources. One sweltering afternoon, Vincent rode out to check on a broken section of fence along the property's eastern border. When he hadn't returned by sunset, Zara felt the first stirrings of worry. By full dark, concern had blossomed into fear. Taking a lantern and her shotgun, she saddled her mare and rode out in the direction Vincent had gone. She found him a mile from the house, pinned beneath his fallen horse in a shallow gully. The animal had apparently stepped in a prairie dog hole and broken its leg in the fall, trapping Vincent underneath. "Zara," he breathed when her lantern light fell across his face. "Knew you'd come." "How badly are you hurt?" she asked, kneeling beside him, heart racing at how pale he looked. "Not sure, can't feel much below the waist, horse's weight." With desperate strength, Zara managed to lever the dying horse enough for Vincent to drag himself free. His right leg was clearly broken and he couldn't stand without support. "Lean on me," she instructed, helping him onto her mare. The ride back was slow and painful. Vincent barely conscious by the time they reached the cabin. Through the night, Zara tended him setting his broken leg, checking for internal injuries, cooling his feverish skin with damp cloths. By morning, his fever had broken, but he remained weak. "You should have been more careful," she scolded as she changed his bandages, hiding her fear behind stern words. "Sorry about the horse," Vincent said, his voice rough. "I don't care about the horse." The words burst from her before she could stop them. "I care about you." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something changed between them. The careful distance Zara had maintained crumbled in the face of how easily she might have lost him. "Zara," Vincent said softly, reaching for her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." This time, she didn't pull away. Vincent's recovery was slow but steady. Unable to perform his usual tasks, he found other ways to contribute, mending tack, carving wooden spoons and bowls to replace Zara's worn utensils, keeping accounts of their livestock and supplies. Zara took on the heavier work, coming in each evening exhausted but determined. During those quiet weeks of recovery, their relationship deepened. Vincent told Zara about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his dreams before the war, the joy he'd found in fatherhood before it was ripped away. Zara shared stories of her nursing days, the patients who had touched her heart, her brother's constant optimism even in the face of frontier hardships. One evening, as summer began its slow transition to fall, Vincent hobbled out to the porch where Zara sat watching the sunset. He was using a cane he'd carved himself, his movements still stiff but improving daily. "Beautiful evening," he remarked, easing himself onto the bench beside her. "It is," Zara agreed, noticing how the golden light softened the lines of hardship on his face. "Your leg seems better." "Getting there," Vincent stretched it carefully. "Doc Simmons says I'm healing well for an old cavalryman." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking," Vincent said finally, "about the future." Zara felt her chest tighten. "Oh, winter will be here soon. The barn gets mighty cold." "I suppose it does." Vincent turned to face her, his expression serious. "Zara, I know you have every reason to be cautious, to keep your heart guarded." She looked down at her hands, at the scar that reminded her daily of betrayal. "But I want you to know something," Vincent continued. "These past months with you have been the first time since losing my family that I've felt truly alive again. You've given me purpose, hope. A reason to stop running." Zara met his gaze, seeing the sincerity there. "Vincent, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not James Blackwell. I don't want your land or your possessions. I just want a chance to build something with you. To see if what I feel, what I think we both feel, can grow into something lasting." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "When I found you under that horse, I realized how much you've come to mean to me, and it terrifies me." "You're too hurt to love again," Vincent said softly, understanding in his eyes. Zara nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Vincent reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Then let me try anyway." In that moment, with the vast Arizona sky darkening above them and the warmth of his hand around hers, Zara made her choice. Leaning forward, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, Vincent's smile held all the warmth of the setting sun. "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe," Zara replied, her own smile tremulous but real. "A maybe with hope." By the time winter arrived, Vincent had moved from the barn to the cabin. They were married by a traveling preacher in a simple ceremony attended by a few neighboring ranchers. Even Hargrove sent a begrudging gift, a fine heifer that improved their small herd. The winter was harsh, with blizzards that isolated them for weeks at a time, but Zara found she no longer dreaded the long, dark evenings. Instead, they became precious time shared reading aloud by lamplight, teaching Vincent to play simple melodies on the piano, planning improvements for the spring. When spring finally arrived, bringing with it new calves and fresh possibilities, Zara realized something had healed within her. The scar on her hand would always remain, a reminder of lessons learned, but her heart had mended in ways she'd once thought impossible. One evening, as they stood surveying their freshly planted fields, Vincent wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "Happy?" he asked simply. Zara leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Yes," she answered, surprised by how true it was. "Are you?" Vincent's arms tightened around her. "More than I ever thought possible again." As the sun sank below the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Zara Wilson Xavier silently thanked the twist of fate that had brought a wounded cowboy to her door. Some hurts never fully healed, some losses never entirely faded, but they had found something precious in each other, not a replacement for what they'd lost, but a new beginning neither had believed possible. Together, they had proven that even the most guarded heart could learn to love again, if given the chance to try.